afterwards. So as you all know by now, electric mobility is on the rise in Europe. The first Tesla hit the Norwegian roads in 2013. Today, in 2021, there are already a few million electric cars on the European road network, and it is the ambition of the European Commission to reach over 30 million cars by 2030. Of course, electric mobility is not limited to cars alone. In a city context, there's also urban freight logistics, e-bikes, buses, and much, much more. If you think about it, over 30 million electric vehicles by 2030, it brings a lot of challenges, but also provides a lot of opportunities. From the Commission, there are two amazing initiatives trying to tackle those challenges and exploit those opportunities. The Smart Cities Marketplace is organized around 6 action clusters in different thematic initiatives. One of those thematic initiatives is electric vehicles for smart cities and communities. The initiative here puts emphasis on matchmaking different stakeholders in 18 smart city projects. And amongst other things, this initiative creates some booklets for cities to introduce them to different technologies. I have the pleasure to be the co-author of a booklet called Electric Vehicles in the Grid. And I'm pretty sure my colleague Agatha will soon provide you with a link in the chat if you're interested to check this out. On the other hand, we also have CIVITAS, which is also an amazing initiative. CIVITAS works around 10 thematic areas, and one of those thematic areas is clean fuels and vehicles. CIVITAS forms a network of different cities, and more than 800 mobility measures have already been implemented. And it also connects more than 330 members from local authorities. So we have with us today a couple of cities. We have with us today a couple of cities from the CIVITAS initiative, amongst them also Munich, Stockholm, and Ljubljana. Later in this session, my colleague Reggie, maybe if you want to turn on the camera quickly, will moderate a discussion where we will explore their experiences in implementing electric mobility technologies. We also have Paul Fenton with us today, who will be discussing the fast track project of CIVITAS for the city of Stockholm. In a previous project, Paul has also worked with Maria, who will be our first speaker today. I myself had the pleasure of working with Maria on electric mobility studies and can definitely confirm her expertise. She will first try to give you an overview of the electric vehicles and their relation to the grid. And last but not least, we also have Gary McRae, Head of Electric Mobility and Urban Foresight, who will be talking about EV City Casebook and Policy Guide. So now I would like to give the floor to Maria, our first speaker. So please don't hesitate to interact with each other or the speakers through the chat. And Maria, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Arnor, and welcome to all of our participants to this session. My task today is to briefly introduce you to the topic of electric vehicle and grid integration from a smart city perspective. I only have 5 minutes to present the topic, and I hope I share with you some ideas, some thoughts that I have that can help further the discussions when we have the rest of the panel speakers. The traditional, is my screen working? Is everything fine? Hope I hear some confirmation.
Yes, everything is fine.
Yes, I guess. So trying to explain the problem of transport electrification and electric vehicles in relation to the grid, I would like to go to the traditional method of describing a problem, which is the 5 Ws. First, we go with the who, the what, the when, and the where. And the who, I think, is very interesting because when we have the electrification challenge, it's a great case where we have actors that traditionally did not collaborate in the past coming together and trying to solve problems. So utilities and energy companies trying to work with OEMs and trying to work with cities, trying to develop infrastructure and try to motivate the citizens. So transport electrification is a case where we have many actor groups that have not worked together, needing to work for developing new solutions. And these solutions should work at the local level, but they should be developed from a global perspective. Technologies have to work in multiple contexts. The what then has to do with how we electrify different fleets and different types of vehicles. So the charging cases can vary. The charging needs vary a lot depending on whether we have a passenger car, whether we have vans, whether we have trucks, buses. They all have different needs and different transport flows that need to match some energy flows in the system. And there comes the different optimization needs and the different requirements in the system. So we need to assess the use cases very carefully there, and not only see EVs as a burden for the grid, creating problems when it comes to peak capacity, but also understanding what are the co-benefits of integrating electric vehicles to the grid when it comes to flexibility and integration of renewables and everything else. Then when it comes to the when question, there are two perspectives I would like to lift. The first one is the time perspective from the duration of its solutions and when to scale up. So time durations when we are introducing new technologies are something to consider. Most of the solutions we have been developing for many years, from demo stage to the local stage and then to the upscaling phases, take a long time before they reach maturity to be adopted by the society. So that is something to consider, how long things take. And the other time-related perspective I would like to lift here is when to optimally charge during the day. And that connects to the use cases that I mentioned previously. So different types of transport have different time needs. So the optimal charging becomes a complicated question. We need to match the peaks and the valleys of the grid to the peaks and the valleys of transport in a smart way. So we need a better understanding of how transport works in the city environment in order to be able to electrify in the right way and ensuring the benefits of electrification that comes from renewable sources. Then we have the second to last probably point, which is the where. And this is the location question, which I'm sure the other participants of this discussion will highlight in future discussions and share experiences. But locating the infrastructure where it's needed sometimes has a lot of challenges in relation to where the grid capacity actually exists and how much we are ready and have planned for the location of this charging infrastructure. We need also, when it comes to where the charging should take place, discuss how the public and the private sphere come together when it comes to where the infrastructure should be placed. There is a lot of regulation at the city level on the public charging infrastructure, but not for the private. And the final point is the why. We need to motivate investments from the private actors. We need to motivate that the public actors lead in this race, but we also need to motivate users to adopt the technology, because electric vehicles make a case which is attractive and better to use than the previous paradigm. We also need to understand where electric vehicles match best and how they complement muscle-driven, for example, mobility when it's probable to be halved, so that we have the best possible system from a multiple benefit perspective. So to summarize, my key takeaways have to do with three perspectives. The time perspective, where we have the pace of technology development and the market being much faster than the pace of legislation and standardization of solutions. So I would very much like to know how we could accelerate process, how could we work together to accelerate. The systems perspective, how to integrate the electric vehicles to the grid, which requires a deeper understanding and collaboration, a better understanding of how people and goods travel, and collaboration between traffic planners, city authorities, and the energy companies. And finally, the user perspective, which is about creating user-friendlier, safe, and secure experiences when it comes to using electric vehicles and charging infrastructure. So the electric vehicles should not be just the right choice from an environmental perspective, let's say, but it should be the best choice for the user, a choice that makes life easier and integrates multiple benefits. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the discussions of this session.
Thank you, Maria, for your beautiful presentation. Again, if you would like to interact with the speakers, don't hesitate to use the chat. And then I would now give the floor to Carrie from talking about EV City case.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'll just try and share my screen if you let me know when if everybody can see it okay.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, yes, so thanks very much. As you said, my name's Gary McRae. I'm the Head of Electric Mobility at Urban Foresight. And today I'll be giving a very brief introduction into the EV City Casebook and Policy Guide, which was launched earlier this year in 2021. And it's focused on scaling up to mass adoption of electric vehicles. So this is the third in a series of EV City Casebooks that we've produced, and it's produced in conjunction with the IEA, the HEV TCP, and the EVI. It's a global analysis of inspiring ideas, policy pioneers, and city-led innovation in electric vehicles. The casebook's made up of 3 different sections, and the first bit is the EV City Casebook, which showcases different cities across the globe and what they're doing well. The second part is the EV City Policy Guide, which gives examples of good policies and challenges across the globe. And the third part of the document is a maturity model, which allows cities to benchmark where they are in the scaling up to mass adoption. So first of all, the EV City Casebook, as you can see there, it features cities from right across the globe. There's over 30 cities included in the book, and covers the 5 key themes. They are buses, taxis, city fleets, shared mobility, and private transport. And so there's examples of good practice in scaling up to mass adoption on each of those themes. Included in that, in the document, is an example from Dundee, from the city in Scotland where I come from, and it's the work that we've been doing at Urban Foresight and Dundee City Council to switch the fleet to electric taxis, where there are more than a quarter of the taxis now in the city of Dundee are pure electric vehicles. So it's really the story about how we did that, the policies, the hearts and minds element, and the incentives that we had there. And every example, as you can see, it covers a different theme, and altogether it gives a really broad range of policies, incentives, and things people can do to make that switch to electric vehicles. The second part of the document is an EV City Policy Guide. So this is really looking at identifying common technical and policy challenges that exist for each city, especially from when they make the move from small scale pilots up to this large scale mass adoption, and the challenges that can bring. It also includes, as you can see on the screen, 10 lessons on what has worked well across different cities. And I don't want to go through them all, you can all read them there, but some of the real ones that I think are very important is first one is policies and how they are across different departments in governments and how they all need to come together. So in cities you have fleet departments, you have planning departments, you have transport departments, usually all doing their own different thing. It's very important that they come together and create policies that really encourage the uptake of electric vehicles. Second one I think is key is for cities to lead by example. I think a city can't be telling its citizens or its businesses what to do if they're not seen to be leading by example. So it's very important, and we'll probably hear from some cities today who are leading by example. And the final kind of one of the key lessons that we look at is having solutions that are sustainable. Often we implement short-term incentives like free electricity or free parking, but often they can distort the market. So it's really trying to make sure that any incentives that are introduced or policies or regulations, we consider the long-term implications of them. And the final part of the casebook is the maturity model. So that is it allows cities to benchmark their progress in reaching mass adoption, as well as understand what to do next. So in each of the categories that we see there, we have a different level that cities can decide where they are, how they're doing in that, and for the different themes as well. And then they can understand kind of on broad terms what to do next, what to tackle next, what to get to the optimized level of all these, which would mean mass adoption of EVs across all themes. What are the next stages to do? So it kind of gives some advice, some questions, some thought-provoking information for cities to try and understand where they are on the journey to maturity. And that's really it from me. It was a very short, quick run through the casebook. It's available on our website, the Urban Foresight website, and it's a really interesting document. Got some really great stories from across the globe and from different cities and how they're doing, the challenges they faced, how they overcame them. So yeah, hopefully it's a good read and it's worth people going to have a quick look at our website. So that's a quick run through from me, and I'll hand you back.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you. The casebook seems very interesting. Next up, it's Paul Fenton, who's going to talk a bit more about CIVITAS and the Fast Track project in Stockholm. So Paul, I would like to give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Maria and to Gary for an interesting start to the discussion. I'll just try and get my presentation onto the screen if it will work, which it doesn't want to, of course, right now. So I'll try again. There. Now it should come.
We can see it.
Let's see. Can you see my presentation? Is it working?
Yes, it's working.
Great. Thank you. Good. Okay. So at the City of Stockholm, we're a partner in a project called Fast Track, which Xylia through Reggie are coordinating. And this project aims to accelerate the implementation of sustainable mobility innovations across Europe. There are 4 thematic clusters: urban logistics and clean fuels, which Stockholm's working as the thematic lead for, and then new mobility and active travel, public transport, and multimodal traffic management. And at this point, I want to say the session's called Clean Mobility, and active mobility is always clean mobility. It's always sustainable mobility. We should walk and cycle as much as possible in our cities, and everything else that involves energy has to be then made as sustainable as possible. And that's our approach in Stockholm. What we want to see happen, we want to see a transition to a fossil fuel free and clean and sustainable energy supply for transportation.
Paul, your slides aren't moving forward. I think you might not be in presentation mode if you think you should be on slide 2 already.
I'm on, I have the second slide up, yeah, with the clusters on.
Yeah, we can still see your first one.
Aha, I'm in presentation mode, so I don't understand why that would be.
Maybe it's taking it from another screen.
I can only see the thing I'm presenting at the moment. I'll stop presentation mode, and how can I do it?
We can see the second slide now, so you might just have to manually work through. Sorry, Anna.
Okay, so I'll do it out of PowerPoint then, if that works, because you can see this slide number 2.
Yes, now we see slide number 2.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I'll do it here. So in the project, we're 4 cities who are thematic leads, and we're working with another 20 cities to exchange experiences and try and accelerate transitions regarding these specific topics. In Stockholm, then, we have to share good practices, and I think this is an interesting example from the project Meister, which is a CIVITAS project. Meister is a project that started. 1 city left the project, and after around 1 year, we were asked to join the project at very short notice, and we did. And that meant we had to introduce measures into this ongoing project that would match the project's outcomes and intentions and everything. And we decided to work on delivery of home care services with electric vehicles. And this was something we wanted to do, and we hadn't had funding to do it in a clear way. So we decided to use this opportunity that appeared with Meister and aim for a rapid introduction of electric vehicles to the municipal home care service fleet. Now, around 18 months later, we've now got 18 vehicles in operation. We've got one more procured, and that's around 1/3 of the city fleet for home care services. And in parallel, we've also done a big study of the private operators, and there are around 290 vehicles operated by private service providers, to see what kind of opportunities and barriers are perceived, and how we can introduce electric vehicle criteria into our forthcoming procurement for those services. So this is a really good example of one of those situations where you have to move very, very fast and decide something that you haven't planned for, and redirect your efforts and resources towards getting it done. I won't say more about that now, but anyone who's interested is welcome to contact us and ask about the Meister project. And these are things that we think are challenges for us in Stockholm. Mobility hubs is a challenge for many reasons. Then electric mobility hubs is a greater challenge. The same for logistics, the same for micro terminals and things. But then the ultra rapid chargers, we have that challenge both for like private vehicles, but mainly for logistics. And this is a really big challenge because it's linked to our grid capacity. It's a huge prioritized area. And one thing we're doing to work on that is talking to many logistics companies and trying to find a way to map how we can do this in the most efficient way possible. Another issue is hydrogen and waterborne transportation. Those are issues that we think are really interesting, but we still don't really know how to approach them, how to resolve them. So that's a little flavor of what we want to get out of Fast Track and what we're putting into Fast Track. And obviously, we welcome all contact about these topics. So feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I want to also thank already the three speakers for the beautiful time management. I'm very interested to see your views in the upcoming panel discussion, which will be moderated by Reggie. So Reggie, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Got there. So we've got about 25 minutes to explore the perspectives of cities a bit more on innovation in mobility in general. I'm the innovation manager for an CIVITAS electric mobility project called Green Charge, and as Paul mentioned, I'm also the scientific coordinator for the Fast Track project. We have two further city speakers with us today. We have Melanie from the city of Munich, who is involved in research and innovation in the field of mobility and was previously with the Technical University of Munich. And we also have Clement with us from the Regional Development Agency in Ljubljana. Clement is a logistics graduate and has also some institutional background with the Transport Institute of Ljubljana. More recently, he has a wide range of experience in mobility management, but also himself is a keen advocate of active mobility. So we would like to kind of bring these different perspectives of innovation together, as Paul referred to earlier. So I'd invite the cities to turn their cameras on as we go through this discussion. But I'd like to start with a question to Clement, which is really just referring to the basics of, as a smart cities network and as a CIVITAS network, we produce an awful lot of advice and guidance to cities. We've heard a taster of it just now, but what do you think is the real effective way of getting practical information to people? Is it through these reports, or is it through something different that we need to adapt as professionals to get the message across?
Thank you for the word, for inviting us to these discussions and to share our topics on this activity. I was surprised to see from the presentation of Gary on the casebook, on the graph he shown, that of course there are many different levels of, let's say, e-mobility activities in everything. And I saw, of course, that in Ljubljana region or in Ljubljana as well, we are, for some areas, and let's say on e-bus mobility or on e-taxis, we are on the level, I would say, only 1 or 2. But when it goes to city fleets, we are quite developed. So I would say, yeah, of course, it goes for some booklets, for some digital or typed documents as well. But what we are currently seeing coming from the fast track participation as within the project, we are kind of, we of course, all cities and regions are looking for some experiences on this field, from some guidance on how to really implement those things. What are the main obstacles, main challenges to be tackled? And yeah, so only when you have some guidance, you can successfully move from just from the strategical elements from the SUMP to the real implementation in real life. And that's actually the greatest challenge for us, which we can, of course, talk about later on. So, but in the overall, I would say all this variety of topics we can, of course, learn from, and that's the best we can learn. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's quite a challenge with such a fast-moving field at the moment to get the information that already exists out to people. So it's always good to get inputs and not wasting our time doing it in the wrong ways. So Melanie, you have quite an experience in working through innovation in Munich. And I wondered where in the process you see the main barriers to doing things more quickly. So obviously there's seeking investment, there's identifying suppliers, there's doing all the feasibility, implementing it and monitoring it. Where, if you needed to do that in a much more shorter period of time, where do you think the main hurdle would be?
It's often depending on the topic. So if you think of bus fleets, then of course it's the investment and the technology that is available on the market. Then if you think about charging points, then it was regulation. It was really a hard struggle to start and to implement from the first point. But then if you once got started and you have all those processes in place, then it was quite fast. So I think it's either on investment, if it's really big investments, or it's on the process, that you really need optimization in processes. It's often based on local regulations and recommendations, of course, but we kind of developed a booklet how to install charging points, for example, where to do and where to do not. And then it's almost easy. So you go out there, you can see at the first, in the first rate where to go, how to install. And then we had a kind of process on the decision making. So it was a decision making in the local spot, at least. So we had a planning. It was like in this area, in this area, in the next area. And then we went out from all the different departments that were affected by this planning, people from the electric supplier and our Stadtwerke München, and from the local district councils who take the decision in the last point. And it was a decision on the spot. So we went out there, all the people were in charge to do this. And it was a decision making, it was marked, and the next one. So there was no talking about off street and then go on the street and go back and go forward. So it was just this decision and it's gone. So that made the processes really fast. It's not.
So it's very much a process of transferring this guidance that we have at the European or national level down to something that's very relevant to practitioners in the individual cities. And maybe we need to think about how easily adaptable the stuff that we produce at a large scale is. Clement, go ahead. Yeah.
I think it's always interesting not to get the best practice, but also from the city's point of view, the kind of worst practice, how to don't do anything. So to avoid all those problems, to avoid all those challenges. That's what I want to add.
Yeah, no, this is a good point. It's obvious everywhere we live, we see things cropping up on our streets that we think, well, how are they still doing that in that way when there's so much advice out there not to? But Clement, you bring an interesting regional perspective to innovation. And what are the opportunities, do you think, for regional layers of government to support innovation opportunities in mobility?
Well, yeah, of course, basic challenges are, of course, in the green procurement procedures. I mean, to get the right papers, I mean, and the right investors into the topic. Then to have the correct packages of incentives to stimulate this specific use of vehicles for different varieties of examples. Then, of course, our challenges is to work close with business and academia and all the research in this topic. So to get, I would say, the best option available on the market to our region. And what I would say the main challenges is to, of course, to integrate the transport policy with, of course, the urban planning and energy supply and public services in a whole coherent way. I mean, if you only look in the topic of e-mobility, of course, there are other sectors and departments who, of course, have to think about it, and that's I would say the most important challenge for us to combine those topics together in one coherent view where our region wants to go in the terms of e-mobility in the, of course, 5, 10, or even more years.
And you mentioned these other kind of drivers. I wonder, there's kind of a very much a technology aspect in the spotlight when we talk about the word innovation at the moment, but there's also the innovation or best practice or not doing things wrong in the more basic forms of transport, bus timetables, cycleways, and all this kind of stuff. Where do you see we are with the balance of those two kind of agendas at the moment, the kind of pushing towards electrification and at the same time trying to make cities and make better quality urban environments for citizens? And I know Ljubljana's for many years has very much been at the forefront of this, even before everyone else started experimenting in the last 2 years. You've been doing that for many years. So have we got the balance right, or do we need to kind of continue thinking about this?
Oh, well, yeah. Well, for the fact, of course, okay, Ljubljana was the green capital of Europe. It's now actually 4 or 5 years ago. And in terms of e-public's fleet, as I've been saying, we are quite developed. But what is currently the most important issue is, of course, I would say, back again on the regional scale, we have quite some well-developed services in the urban areas. I mean, in the areas, I would say 2 kilometers around outside the city center, but in all the other areas around where some specific measures, when we're talking about the smart measures, they are measures who are in a way small, but have the most effective, I would say, outcome. And this is exactly what's happening now in the peripheries, or where all this new infrastructure, new services will, I would say, are just spreading out right now. And those are the areas where we actually have to be very much focused on. This applies to learn, and despite the fact on all the good things we're doing in Ljubljana, we still have around 75% of commuters entering Ljubljana with their own cars, which are in only few percentiles electric. So we are still on the hard way to go.
Yeah, I think this is important. We don't generalize city progress on what we see happening in city centres, either as visitors or holidaymakers or professional tourists. We try and also think about what's going on in the suburbs where these innovations can be, they can be the last places that the innovation actually breaks through. Melanie, the same question to you really in Munich, and also thinking about the sustainability in terms of time of the measures that are being put forward and how you're able to sustain progress. Where is the balance between technology and non-technological innovation in mobility, do you think, in Munich? And from a wider perspective, the messages you hear from the European Union on this matter at the moment.
So our balance, we have to care about what the citizens' needs are and how to go on with technology. We had the project Smarter Together, where we wanted to bring together the citizens with new technologies to really experience how they work, so they could look into advice for detecting people, for example. What does a camera do and how does it process data? So to get to know the people, what it's all about, or even charging infrastructure, what does it look like on the inside? What is it all about? And so this communication is a really important thing. So we are now in the new founded mobility department, and we have an own division for communication. We really believe that communication, new technologies, and digitization is a really important point, and what it's all about, and what might be the enabler for people changing their mobility behavior and changing their used cars, if they are electric cars or not. So we do have a program on supporting the use of electric vehicles. It was from the state of Germany, and we had it put in place in Munich, but we had to, so it wasn't sustainable because Germany as well, German ministry had a program, so we had to turn back ours. But we have it on small vehicles or cargo bikes still in place. So it's not just the vehicles, but also cargo bikes, electric cargo bikes that are, so it should be sustainable. It should be in different ways. It's not just the electric vehicle on the street. We have to think, care about citizens' needs. It's not just a charging point put in place on the street, but also off street. We have now the regulations. In former times, we had the so-called, we had problems with our home ownership associations in Germany. So it's a construction topic. And if one person in this association is against anything that is changed on the construction, then it was impossible to install any charging point. And this was a concerning point for a lot of home ownership associations, mine as well. So we were not able to put a charging point in place. And so it's on a different level. So we have to communicate, we have to really care about on-street and off-street, and not just the cars, but the public transport and the non-motorized mobility.
Yeah, but it sounds from the first half of your answer that some of the digital systems that come with these new forms of mobility actually benefit other forms of mobility, because some of the monitoring becomes a bit more sophisticated, the data flows are more enhanced, and people just understand technology a bit better and what it can do for mobility. So I wanted to bring in some of the other speakers that presented these toolkits earlier, and to start with Gary. You mentioned in your presentation, I think, the lack of people working together, or the fact that people haven't worked together historically on this topic. Is there a top tip that comes out of your document that you think people really need to read and understand as kind of one key message?
One of the keys we've got is having a governance structure, because these departments are off working on their own. So it's really just to, I think, has been said a lot of the time, that mobility is changing. It's touching energy, it's touching how the way people live now. So it's not just transport anymore, which is the problem. And the problem is governments were set up with quite rigid structures that they're now struggling to move across. So really trying to have a governance structure, or have somebody that sits across all these departments and can bring everybody on the journey. I think that is very important, that people come on the journey and understand why they're doing it. It goes back to old theories of management of change, isn't it? You need to communicate what you're doing and tell people why you're doing it. Tell people why mobility is part of the energy, it's part of how the city will change in the future. So that a group that covers the whole of a government and with the same message, I think is very important, and can't be underestimated how powerful that can be. And it is a real change and a real challenge for governments to change from how they work for the last 20, 30, 40 years.
And are there any outstanding cities that you found within your casebook that do this well, or is it very much a patchwork of people still shifting around to get it right at the moment?
Yeah, I think when we did the casebook, our biggest finding was many cities were very good at a certain aspect of it. There was very few cities who had covered all of them, and that's just, sometimes that's policy. Some cities have no control over the bus fleet that are in their control. So cities are good at what they have direct control over, and the bits that they don't have direct control over, they're struggling. So, but then you look at places in China where it's different. They've been able to do mass scale adoption of buses and cars and taxis. They're great examples of how to do the infrastructure, how that's needed. But yeah, I think cities across the rest of the world are they're great examples of good work in an area. But yeah, the aim for all of us is to be great at everything, but that's a real challenge.
Yeah, and to keep it up as well. Thanks for that, Gary. Maria, do you have kind of one top tip from the work that you've been doing that you would think is useful, particularly on the kind of acceleration of innovation aspect?
I think it's quite important to allow time for the projects or the ideas or the implementation to flourish before actually going for the implementation. And as I also mentioned before, I think it's very important to first develop a common language between all these different stakeholders and practitioners in order to make it happen. So sometimes being a bit patient or trying to be proactive, I think is very important. And we have these two worlds, the energy/grid world, trying to communicate with the urban planning and transport perspectives. There are things that are the same word. They are the same word but mean totally different things from the two perspectives. So sitting and discussing even the small details, I think is very important.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. I'm more of a non-engineer background, and I started working on a electric charging project, and they started talking about architecture, and it was software architecture rather than buildings. And yeah, there's all sorts of instances of that occurring. Paul, just to bring you back in, either from your experience with Meister on the specific project that you outlined to us, or more broadly, is there anything that you're really looking to fast track to improve in terms of that process of doing things quickly?
I don't know. That particular example is really interesting because we've had for many years procurement criteria that's guided us towards hybrid vehicles and biogas, and the long-term objective of this being to phase out the emission, to make the vehicles clean, silent, etc. And this opportunity arose, so we kind of pushed it forward. Really, that means you have to know what you want to achieve. You do have to go through that process of identifying what you're trying to achieve and why, and who can be influential in a process, and have a good sense of who you need to engage and involve and when. So even if I can say we don't have a perfect governance model in any sense of the word, we invest a lot of resources in talking to different stakeholders. We have dialogue processes with the energy companies, with the logistics companies, with other transport stakeholders, and we really try to always have a clear idea of what's viable and possible within a short term, medium term, long term, and try to make sure that our plans and processes are matching that we have procurement processes that let you take a realistic step forward. Because we know if we say we want everything electric tomorrow, it might not be possible. But it might be possible if we say we want some now, we want some in a few years, we want, having some kind of realistic approach is important. But that means you have to talk to everybody, and then you have to somehow filter all the information and put it into what you want. And then when you've done that, then it's quite easy to say, oh, we have this on the shelf thing that we can just stick in and do right now. And of course, you need the politicians to have given you the mandate to do that. You need to have all of the right documentation in place in your city to be able to make those steps. That stuff is important too in the public sector. But if you can't do it yourself, and you know that there's 10 companies in your neighborhood that want to do it, help them. Let them get on with it. That's the other side of the role. If the city can't move fast enough, help other people move faster.
So it sounds like that rapidity shouldn't be the only objective here, because there are some valuable creating visions and speaking the right language to people, things that have to happen. But what is an acceptable rate of delivery? What does fast tracking actually mean to you, Paul, in terms of time?
Like, fast tracking should not be just about trying to do things fast. It should be about taking something that you know is worth doing, that you know can work, and really trying to push the resources, the people, the companies, whatever, in the direction of that to make sure that it happens quicker and at a larger scale.
Thank you very much. And Clement, from a regional perspective, quite often regions have these big, long 2030 strategies or 2040 strategies. What's your aspiration for moving quickly, and how do you think that can be best facilitated at the regional level? Top tips.
Well, top tips. Yeah, we've had a quite good example in our region. It's not directly related to e-mobility in a way, but what we found out, the best way to have it, I would say, faster, is to have this construction documents ready even before you try to implementing. Before you think of the money and everything, we have 25 municipalities, and we had a plan to build 13 park and rides around city of Ljubljana. And what we did, we helped municipalities prepare all those documentations on the localities, on all the, all the typical aspects of what this thing should have. And then we waited for the right time when the proper money came from the regional development funds. Then we had all the documents ready and issued them and held those parking facilities made in, I would say, 2 years. So that's my example. Be ready with the documents, because when the timing comes, you need to be prepared not to wait for another few years. It happens the same probably with the e-charging, with all the fleets and everything. Just be ready when things are happening.
I think that's a really good tip. I think sometimes people haven't put the plan in place because they've thought, oh, we haven't got the money, what's the point? But then there's a question in the chat here about the impact of COVID, which I think is another hour we would need for that. But I think some of the cities that even had plans in place then, they were able to roll at least some of those out as public acceptability changed, as additional funding for experiments became available. And they would have been 3 or 6 months behind the curve if they hadn't had any kind of map of at least some ambitions in place. So I think that's a good tip, and also using the regional level as a centre of expertise that can be drawn on from other constituent local authorities. So just circling back to you, Melanie, for the final pitch, I guess, before we close, on your top tips and again on this acceleration aspect, what is reasonable to deliver a scheme? And I know you said earlier this varies between modes, but we have this big climate related timeframes in our minds now, and these things are only 9 years away, and that goes very quickly in local government. So how do we do it? How do we succeed?
Did not work. The city of Munich is building up a program we have the climate change and we have to care about. And so the pandemic has built up a situation in Munich that we do not have the money for any programs except for those climate programs, for example. So this is really a big program, and you need a strategy. So we built up a strategy where to put efforts in. So it's not just electric vehicles, but it's on all the other topics you have to care about, if it's buildings and so on. So it's just within a bigger strategy. And we are now creating our new mobility strategy. So that's for 2035. So we have this ambition of being climate neutral till 2035. And we want a modal shift. And we have strategies for each topic. So we have the big strategy as a framework, but then a strategy on each topic, and they should be fast adjustable. So things are moving fast. Digitization is moving fast. New services arise, new services go away. So we also already experienced some new ideas that are not on the market anymore. So yes, we have to act faster as a city. And so this new strategy isn't just a sustainable sump, but it's a strategy, a framework strategy with a clear ambition And within this clear ambition, you have for each topic, you have your own strategy that should be on track and that should be right ahead what's coming on, and not caring about all the others and waiting for all the others to build up a new strategy. So that is our tip from the strategy side.
Very good, and I'm sure that kind of reflects what Maria was saying about these 4 or 5 key elements. Where I'm misquoting you here, Maria, but I think they were really useful to have some specific, delivery aspects within the strategy. Not, we kind of repeat the same visions, but actually having those action plans or thematic sections within your mobility plan allow you to be a bit more focused around what is actually needed. Okay, well, I think that's been kind of insightful in terms of we don't need to just rush and do things. We need to think about what we're doing, and there's still a role for planning, which is good for the planners to hear. In the last 2 minutes, does anyone have a burning thing on the top of their tongue that they're frustrated that I haven't asked them? Now is your chance to take the floor.
I think you just made a nice point, which we'll see over the next month with football, that if you just rush around, you won't get very far. If you have a strategy and some tactics and a bit of a plan, then maybe it'll go a bit better, and maybe you'll also be able to play faster too. Okay,
so that's a tip for all our social media to make the most of the Euros in terms of getting our message across. Great. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I'll hand back to Arno.
Yes, thank you very much, Reggie. Thank you all for the very interesting discussion. And thank you all very much as well for the very good time management. I would encourage you to definitely check out all the links we sent to the different booklets in the chat. I think there's a lot of valuable information to be found there. And I think we can close the session 5 minutes earlier than foreseen. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you found this as interesting as I did.
Thanks, everybody.